Okay, let's get this started. This is a main route Omori bosses tier list, so there's no Hikikomori route bosses on this tier list video, though I might do one in the future. Also, at the end of the video, I might move some bosses around the tier list. But before we start, here is the content warning for the game. And also spoilers ahead for the game, though that's obvious. First up on the boss tier list is, well, boss. So boss, contrary to his name, isn't really a boss per se, but more of a tutorial on the mechanics of the game. But boss fight aside, the character of boss isn't expanded on too much after the fight. You can talk to him later on in the game when you're looking for Basil, and the boss will ask you if you have found Basil yet. But besides this, his character isn't really expanded upon that much. Okay, so I've just learned you can meet boss while you're inside Humphrey, and I also found out that boss creates the boss rush during the Hikikomori route. But I didn't know this, since I haven't actually done the Hikikomori route yet. After all, this is a main bosses tier list. But boss as a first boss, and as a character, is actually quite good. So for this, I'm going to be putting boss in the C tier. Next up, we have the download window boss. Now, the download window boss has always kind of stuck out to me, since it's so random. It just kind of comes out of nowhere when you're halfway through the junkyard. And that's what makes this boss so good to me. It's so, I don't know how to explain it. It's just so random. It's funny almost. And also, the music from this boss, in my opinion, is one of the best songs on the Omori soundtrack. I don't know what it is about the song for this boss, but it just stands out so much to me. I also really like the old Windows aesthetic of the boss, and it's, in my opinion, the first real boss in Omori. Though it only really has one attack, I think I'll put the download window boss in B tier. Captain Spaceboy is like a pirate, but in space. You meet him in Otherworld, but he's bedridden because of a breakup, and his pirates ask you to find a music tape in the junkyard, because the music tape, like, cheers him up. You find the music tape and return. Kel plays the tape, and it angers Captain Spaceboy, but you don't fight Captain Spaceboy, you fight his, like, persona.
When I was young, feisty boy.
Space boyfriend. He shoots his pillow and then the boss starts. This boss is actually really good, and I know this is really random, but the background for this fight, it just looks really cool. I'm putting this boss in the SS tier, one of my favorites in the game. Kite Kid is a boss that I had no clue existed until I looked at the tier list, and I saw him and I thought at first he was Captain Spaceboy, and to be fair, they both look familiar. Maybe they even are the same person. There's a game theory for it. But this boss is actually really good. It's a good early game boss, and it even gets harder if you start the fight on one day left. I'm gonna put him in the B tier because for an early game boss, he can be kind of challenging. So next up is our first two real world bosses in Faraway Town, not counting the first boss fight with Aubrey as it ends in one turn. We have Angel and Charlene. It's more of a boss fight against Angel, as Charlene just kind of stands there, so it's more of a boss fight against Angel, but that doesn't make this boss bad. This boss is actually really good for a first boss in Faraway Town. I think Angel as a character is actually really good. He kind of acts as the Maverick's sidekick or apprentice, and I also really like the design for Angel. Charlene as a character is also one of my favorites out of the hooligans. I think this is the perfect first fight in Faraway Town, and for this I think I'm gonna put them both in the B tier. Now we have the Maverick. Now the Maverick is 100% one of my favorites out of the hooligans. I don't know what it is, but his personality is just super memorable and it's super funny. Now I don't know if this is canon or if this was intended, but I've always thought that the Maverick was based off of or a parody of Logan Paul. I don't know if I'm the only one that thought this on my first playthrough, but I mean the blonde hair, the fact he's literally called the Maverick. But when I checked the wiki, I didn't see anything that pointed to him being a parody of Logan Paul, so I guess maybe I'm the only one that made this correlation. But as a boss fight and as a character, the Maverick is super good, so I'm gonna put him in A tier, though I was thinking of putting him in S tier, so it might change. Our next two bosses are Kim and Vance. Now Kim is a pretty decent character. Vance, on the other hand, not so much. Vance doesn't really do anything after this boss or before it. Kim has more personality and does more, so I'd say Kim is the better character, but Vance isn't the worst character on the tier list either. I'm gonna put Vance in the D tier and I'm gonna put Kim in the B tier. Now we have the best Faraway Town boss fight, the Aubrey fight. The build up to this fight is the most suspenseful thing I've ever had to go through. It's you, Kel, and Aubrey having this argument in the middle of church, and then Aubrey drops this bombshell out of nowhere. Mary is dead, and it just comes out of nowhere, and then the argument gets more heated, and the people in the church start picking on Aubrey. And then the fight starts, and the music for this fight is just it's perfect. It encapsulates how Aubrey is feeling in this moment. The song just feels angry but sad at the same time. Then after the fight is over, Aubrey just storms out of the church, and you can't help but feel sad for Aubrey. This fight is honestly top tier stuff, and for this, it's going in the S tier. King Crawler is basically the download window of the forest area of the map. King Crawler can heal by eating sprout moles, and I didn't notice this till I was writing the script for this video, but his body is also made up of sprout moles. But besides this, there's not that much significant about this boss, but it's not a bad boss by any means. I think I'll put King Crawler in the C tier. Now we have Sir Maximus. Sir Maximus the second, Sir Maximus the third, and Sir Maximus the fourth. Wow, that's a mouthful. Sir Maximus is basically an elite knight who has trained for years. It sounds intimidating, right? Well, they're basically a slightly harder version of the Harrows, Harrow being the title given to the Sprout Mole Knights, courtesy of the Omori wiki. But there are 3 versions of Sir Maximus, so if you want a Sir Maximus tier list, here you go. I'm gonna put Sir Maximus in the C tier because I like the design of the character, and the joke of Sir Maximus the second and the third caught me really off guard. So that just makes the character for me. So we're putting him in the C tier. Next up on the tier list we have Sweetheart. Now Sweetheart is an interesting one. So we first get introduced to Sweetheart with the show, and then some stuff happens, and boom, Sweetheart has banished you to the dungeon. You break out, you more open the already unlocked cell door, nearly get caught, wear the faces of Sprout Moles, manage to sneak through the castle. Sweetheart's marrying themselves, Aubrey steps in, and now it's Sweetheart boss time. Now the Sweetheart boss is actually quite challenging. I remember on my first playthrough I actually had a good bit of trouble with the boss. Now arguably the best part of the boss is the music. Well, now that I think about it, I don't think there's a single bad song on the entire Omori soundtrack, but World's End Valentine is a top 10 song on the soundtrack. If it wasn't for World's End Valentine, I probably would have quit the boss probably an hour into it. I was stuck on the boss for at least 3 hours, and the music's the only thing that kept me going. And I eventually got there, and honestly this boss is just top shelf. So for this, it's going in the S tier. Now Mr. Jawsome is like a casino owner, businessman,
railway magnate, sugar dealer, oil man.
And this boss takes place in the last resort, but you don't really fight Mr. Jawsome, you fight his henchmen, and then you might get a hit on him every once in a while. I feel like the contract system from the boss man hero fight should have been in the Jawsome fight, but it's not a bad fight whatsoever. I think it's an A tier fight. Now we have Pluto Expanded. You fight Pluto Expanded right after the Mr. Jawsome fight, since he's like Mr. Jawsome's bodyguard or his best employee besides hero. I don't know how Pluto was employed for Mr. Jawsome, since when you first meet him he's wanted by like the space pirates for being an outlaw, and then he helps you fast travel for the rest of the game. So just for that, he's going in the S tier. S tier boss and S tier character. Now we have the Humphrey scientist? Is that actually what I have written down? There's no way they're called the Humphrey scientists. I'm checking this. Okay, they're not called the Humphrey scientists. I knew it. Forgive me. I wrote this script at like 4 a.m. Please forgive me. In my opinion, this boss is actually pretty good for the end game. They do this move where they like switch your juice and health around, and I know I've probably said this 10 times already, but the music for this boss, it's just so good. I'm gonna put this boss in the A tier. Now we have Humphrey. Now I have a lot to say about Humphrey, and to sum it up, he's not that good. This boss is my least favorite boss in the whole game. To even fight Humphrey, you have to first find a key card, and to find the key card, you have to go into 3 different areas where you have to like build a bridge, run from a cab monster, solve puzzles, to defuse a bomb. And this area is honestly super good, but the boss, no. Humphrey as a boss just kinda sucks. It takes at least 3 years to beat Humphrey. On my first playthrough, I thought he was invincible. Humphrey is being banished into the Abyss tier. Now we have the best faraway town boss in my opinion, the Basil fight. Now the Aubrey and Basil fight are tied, but I think the Basil fight is a little bit better than the Aubrey fight. The Aubrey fight has better music, since the Basil fight music is the fight ends with Basil taking your eye out, and honestly it's an S tier boss and an S tier faraway town boss, so it's going just a tiny bit above Aubrey, but I still really like the Aubrey fight. The Omori boss fight is one of my favorite bosses in the entire game. Honestly, I'd say it's one of my favorite bosses in any game that I've ever played. The music, the fact the background will change and become more distorted as the fight goes on. It is honestly the perfect boss to end off this game. Probably worth mentioning that the fight is scripted for you to lose. You beat Omori by using the Cherish skill. Then on the game over screen, you're asked if you would like to continue. By clicking yes, you come back from the dead, finishing the last duet with Mari to beat Omori. The way that the game uses the Omori will not succumb feature during the fight, turning something that saved you previously into something that prevents you from winning the fight, is honestly great. The Omori fight is honestly an SS tier fight, and it earns its spot there by being one of my favorite bosses. This is the end of the video. I am going to make 3 changes to the tier list. I'm going to move the Maverick and Mr. Jawsome into the S tier, and I'm moving Humphrey lower on the tier list. By the way, my mic cut off during the last ranking, if you're wondering why it cut off. I hope you're having a good day. Thanks for watching.